Mm. Uh, Fine. Can I just get a heads up if I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. Fine. So yeah, good morning, everyone. And for today's agenda, we're going to go through the entire life cycle of how we as cybersecurity engineers process in the industry and how we are going to progress with that. Yeah, okay, there's a question in chat. 𝐏𝐤𝐞𝐚𝐬𝐞 Security Plus. Yeah, it is aligned with the 𝐏𝐤𝐞𝐚 Security Plus certification. So yeah, it will help you clear that. But obviously, like even the 𝐏𝐤𝐞𝐚 course will give you some amount of dumps and some amount of data to study later on, right? So if required, we will be able to provide that as well in order for you to appear for any examination, right? But just to say, this entire course will be adhering to 𝐏𝐤𝐞𝐚 Security Plus and Certified Ethical Hacker by EC Council, these two curriculums. Yeah, so fine. If there are any questions from the session that we had yesterday, we can just take a quick couple of minutes to answer anything regarding that, and then we can move forward with our session. If there are any questions, please do let me know. You can let me know on chat, or you can unmute yourself and let me know whatever. Okay, so I take that as no questions. Fine. Okay, so let's begin. Yeah. So what we'll be seeing first is the entire life cycle of what we perform in a very, very simple kind of system hack that we do. It will be on Linux. So firstly, whatever we do in our environment, or all of the hacks to say that we do in our environment, will all be done in a virtual machine. Okay. So you will be hacking yourself using virtual machines, and that would be it for the like security part of it, because we won't encourage you to go out and try to find bugs in different websites, which can get you in trouble at the end of the day, right? So what we'll be seeing first is the hacking life cycle. I think since not a big fan of PPTs, an image from Google will be able to help us understand this better. Okay, this is something. ah, so, just a second. Yeah. So these are the 5 steps of hacking. Okay. Reconnaissance, scanning, maintaining access, gaining access, maintaining access, and clearing tracks. Now we'll understand this through a practical example in a while. But let's take a scenario now. Let's do a little bit of a study that what are these phases about? So firstly, we come to reconnaissance, right? So what happens in the industry is whenever you are working as a cybersecurity engineer that deals with penetrating other systems and then going around finding bugs and things like that, this is something that you follow, right? So this is the terminal. Right. First phase, reconnaissance, or recon as we call it. Reconnaissance is nothing but the phase where you start gathering information about the target, right? It can be OSINT that we did in the last session itself, finding its IP address, what it is, what languages is it using, what framework it is using, all of those. Uh, Apart from which, you can do something like Google Docs, right? You can find data that is on the website itself, right? There's one very, prevalent question in the field of certified ethical hacker, where if you attend the classes for certified ethical hacker, the first question that is asked to you by the trainer is, so I'll take a moment, I'll open chat and give you some time to answer this. Right. So say, let's take a scenario. So there is a company called Company A, right? Now, what you need to do is the data about what languages this company uses is not available. Okay. What we see on builtwith.com is what languages does the website use, right? So in order to do web application security. So what I want to know is what languages does this entire company give services for? So it's a service-based company, right? So I want to know, the ultimate goal is what languages does this company specialize services for, right? So maybe the nature of this company is that it provides technical people to other companies in order to fulfill their tasks, or it's a application based company that develops applications for other clients, right? So what we want to know is what languages does this company use for its entire operation. Any idea how we can get it? Guys, any idea? If there is if you don't have an idea, just no, Sukrit, I don't mean business logic. Well, I just need the languages this company uses, or what languages are these developers in this company coding in.
So can we get it from source code?
You can or the all the source code you have is just the website, okay, but you don't have any idea what languages they use internally. Yes, Gino, the Java, C, what kind of languages are these people using? So there's one go-to source that you will go to where whenever you are looking for these kinds of things. Right. So, okay, let's take the answer. So now the scenario is we don't have an access to what are the languages, what are the frameworks, what are the developers using in order to develop apps for their other clients, like, right? So what we do is we simply go to LinkedIn and we search for job posts on this company, right? Job post will say hiring Java developers, hiring C developers, hiring Android developers, right? So we get an idea from that this company is providing services in Java, C, maybe Python if they have an hiring for that, and Android, right? So Android can be Kotlin or Java or even Dart, right? So these are things that are part of the critical thinking module whenever you are going through the certified ethical hacker course. And this is what we will be discussing in depth in the course as well. So this is something that this is a trick question that is asked by a lot of companies in interviews as well. And it is taught in the first class of certified ethical hacker or CompTIA as well. Right. So now like coming back to this reconnaissance or recon. Recon, obviously, we discussed that it was OSINT, it was dorking, it was things like these. Uh, so it's basically gathering data available without interaction with the target, right? So, okay, sorry for that. Yeah. Next phase comes scanning, right? Scanning is, okay, there's a question. If domain or websites name changing continuously, then how to find what is programming language? Okay. if the website is changing continuously, how do you find the programming language for, let's say, that website itself? Okay. So there's a very neat tool called Wayback Machine. Okay. We'll take the example of this website itself, ilovepdf.com. So ilovepdf.com standing on in today's date looks like this, right? Maybe I want to look at it and see what kind of languages is it using and what kind of date, framework it was using back in maybe some years back, right? So I go to Wayback Machine. I paste the URL here, browse history, and you'll get a time frame here, right? So in this time frame, whatever you see right here is the frequency of snapshots of this particular website that has been taken. Maybe I want to see the snapshot of, say, 2014. I click on 2014. All of these dots that you see against dates is the number of snapshots taken. The bigger the dot on a particular date, the more snapshots it has. So let's just say 29th March. Let's click on this. This is what I Love PDF looked back in 2014, right? So we get an idea that even if the website was changing, what kind of things were happening on the website. So now how do I know about what kind of things that were being used in this particular website? I use built with on the built with Chrome plugin, or I simply go to inspect elements, interact with the website, look at the APIs, what kind of return tokens that it is sending, and I get an idea of it. This is how we actually do it. Now, if we are talking the context that we talked about, the programming languages, right? So there were job posts. Now, say job posts were there on this website itself. Maybe it had a job portal, right? So the job posts now are not going to be the complete history of what they are using, right? So there might be a job post of Java that was open back in 2017, and when it was open, that was when the hiring completed, it never opened up once again. Now we just see that it is hiring for Python. So this is when we come to Wayback Machine. We go back in time, click on the 2017 snapshots, and look at the job posts then. And then we get an idea about the website. So it's fairly simple. It's a little bit, of a manual effort right here, but it's fairly simple. And this is how we actually do it in the industry as well. Uh, Naresh, I hope that answers your question. Yeah. Okay. Next step is scanning. Scanning is nothing but, very much self-explanatory with the word scanning itself. We are looking for IP addresses of the system that we can potentially hack. Okay. So scanning does not only mean IP addresses, it also means services, right? So services run on ports, right? So all of the things that you see here, this entire website is running on a port. Now, these ports are not USB ports or Ethernet ports or anything of that sort. These are logical ports. Each computer is capable of having 65,535 ports, right? So all of these ports can support a particular service. Now, there are some default services like port number 22 runs a service called SSH. Port number 23 runs a service called Telnet. This entire website is serving on port 443, which is the service for HTTPS. If it was HTTP, you would have said that this entire website is running on port number 80, right? So there are default services that are there. Now, these default services comes with its vulnerabilities, right? So, and there are, in order to, mitigate these services or mitigate these vulnerabilities, each service releases its patch, right? So you update Java from time to time. You update, HTTP from time to time, Apache from time to time, which is a web server. So Apache 1 had a vulnerability which was fixed in Apache 1.2, right? So things go on like this. Now there's a very prevalent term in the cybersecurity world, and that is no services are vulnerable, right? Is the version of the service that is vulnerable. Okay. So we'll understand that while we are doing the live hack today. So just remember that if a service, so we scan for services, ports, versions, operating systems, and many, many more, right? But the thing that we want to focus on here is the version of the services that are running, right? So say Apache is a service which serves a website. It's a web server. Okay. So Apache 1 had a vulnerability which was patched in Apache, you know, let's just say Apache greater than 1, right? So this is how the life cycle goes, and you have to continuously update your components or your services. Hence, we will be leveraging that here. So yeah, scanning. Next comes gaining access. Gaining access is the part where we actually find the vulnerability, and we exploit that vulnerability in order to gain access to that particular system that we are talking about. So this entire access can be done using malware as well. It can be done using vulnerable services as well, right? Malware is easier. It just needs to be propagated to a system. If you install a malware on your system, it automatically gives you access. You don't have to exploit any vulnerability, right? But if there is a vulnerability, you can simply exploit that we'll be seeing today. After gaining access comes maintaining access. Right. So the thing is that whenever, say, I have run a malware on your system. So this is how malwares actually function as well. I have installed a malware on your system. You turn your computer off after a day, and you boot it up once again next morning, right? So in the period that this you turned your computer off and then left the office or left it at your table, this malware couldn't do anything, right? If it was a low level malware, there are other malwares as well that are capable of doing stuff in that period as well. But now the malware wasn't able to do anything. Now you restart the computer, and the malware will not run anymore by itself, right? So malwares come with a script, right? That script embeds itself to the boot up script on your system. So what happens is whenever you boot your computer off, even if you have turned your computer off and you boot your computer up once again, this script is going to run, and it is going to run the malware once again every time you boot your system, so that persistence is maintained, so that the malware is always running, right? That is maintaining access. You can't just, have access to a system and then one fine day, the very next moment lose it, right? Because that is not the deal, because we need to gain data from it, right? So maintaining access is another step for it. And finally, covering tracks. So each and every activity that you do on a computer is logged, right? So every login, every file that is created, every service that is running, every port that is open, everything is logged on your computer, right? The first thing that we do after we log into the computer is stop this logging process. Okay. I'll give you a small example. Say, I am running these commands, right? ifconfig, which gives me my IP address. Sorry. Terminal. Yeah. So I ran a couple of commands, right? And if I press the upper arrow on my computer, see, it goes to all of the commands that were there, right? So you can actually stop these from happening. Let's just say, yeah. So all of these are part of history, right? So it has 168 histories. The first thing that we do is stop this history from logging itself. Okay. So this is what is meant by covering tracks. Also, cd/var cd log. So this is where logs for the entire system, that is the Linux system, is stored, right? So the first thing that we come to do after we have logged in is either delete these files or stop these files from writing on itself or appending, so that we do not have any logging which can track us at the end of the day, because it logs everything starting from your IP address that you have accessed from, to the service that you have installed, or the malware that is running, or the port that is open, right? So this is what is the entire process that we follow in the field of cybersecurity. Now, there's one thing that I need every one of you to know is this is the 5-step process of cybersecurity, right? 5-step process of hacking. But many of the interviewers, or whenever you are asked questions, they ask things like, what are the 5 steps of penetration testing? 5 steps of hacking is recon, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, and covering tracks, right? Some people might ask 5 steps of penetration testing, right? 5 steps of penetration testing, on the other hand, is very, very simple. There's a pre-attack phase, attack phase, and a post-attack phase, right? So it means nothing, but it actually covers all of these terms in just 3 parts. In the pre-attack phase, when we have not exploited a vulnerability, we have done scanning and recon, right? We are not exploiting anything. We are not interacting or gaining access to the target, right? So that is the pre-attack phase. Pre-attack phase is nothing but recon and scanning. Attack phase is gaining access. Post-attack phase is maintaining access and covering tracks. Okay. These are some of the questions that are asked in interviews as well. 5 steps of hacking, 5 steps of penetration testing. What are the 3 pillars of cybersecurity? The confidentiality, integrity, and availability triad that we did in the last session. So yeah, that's basically the part of it. Now, what we'll be doing today is we are going to be hacking into a Linux system called Metasploitable 2. We're using a framework called Metasploitable framework. So Metasploitable 2 is a VM, or a virtual machine, that is deliberately made vulnerable so that these kinds of demos can be, facilitated, right? Now, we are going to use a framework called Metasploit. So a framework is nothing but essentially, how many of you are developing, or how many of you know how to develop, and you have what is your preferred programming language? You can write it down on chat. What's your preferred programming language? Okay, if you're not a developer, that's completely fine. We'll take it from there. But if you are a developer, please let me know about your preferred programming language. Anyone? You can even unmute yourself and let me know. Python. Fine. Okay. So we'll just take Python here, right? So Python, the framework for Python is something like either Django or it can be there's Django and there's Flask, right? So Django and Flask are frameworks for Python. That means, or if you are familiar with Java, Spring Boot is a framework for Java. So what happens in these frameworks is it contains a lot of modules, right? Do you want to develop a model? Here is a module for it. Do you want to develop a website? Here's a module for it. Do you want to develop an API? Here's a model for it. Here's a module for it, right? So it contains a lot of modules. Now, all you need to do is take these modules and put it to your use. So a framework is nothing but in vaguely translated terms, nothing but a database of modules that you can use in order to fulfill your work that whatever you are trying to do. So we are going to use a Metasploit framework, right? So in Metasploit framework as well, we have 5 steps. Okay. The 5 steps in the Metasploit framework is search, use, show, set, and exploit. Right. In search, what we are going to do, we are going to search for vulnerabilities. Use, whatever is the vulnerability that we search for, if we find that vulnerability in the database, we will use the search term. That is the vulnerability that we saw. Show is nothing but checking options like attack machine IP address, victim IP, and so on. Set is we need to confirm the options that we saw in the last step. And finally, exploit. Exploit is nothing but a command which will do all of the work for you in order to exploit a system via a vulnerability. So what we'll be doing is we will be using VirtualBox and a VM called Metasploitable VM2. So I'll start this VM. Now, all of these lab setups for Metasploit, for any kind of, cybersecurity tools will be covered in the classes as well. Let's wait for that to start. Okay. So, now my thing is running, right? Now, since I have access to the system, I'll do a little bit of a, cheat code here. I'll just check for the IP address, right? But I'll show you how to get the IP address as well. So what I want to do now is get the IP address of the machine that is running on my VirtualBox, right? So it's as simple as running something like netdiscover. So root here. So I'll run a command called netdiscover. Let's wait for that to capture. Yeah. So PCS so netdiscover is a command that will show you the IP addresses of all devices connected to your Wi-Fi network, except for your device, right? So it has found the IP address 192.168.0.106. 192.168.0.101 is nothing but my D-Link Wi-Fi access point. So 192.168.0.106 is my target machine. Now, we are going to skip the recon phase because this is recon that we did. We found the IP address. We didn't interact with the target because it's on the same network as mine, right? And we are not taking any web end right here. Right. The next thing that we are going to do is scanning. Right. So we are done with recon. We are going to go to scanning. For scanning, we are going to use a tool called Nmap or network map. Nmap hyphen small s capital S. That means SYN scan. SYN is a type of data packet. Capital S small v, which stands for version scan. So as I said, it's never a version that it's never a service that is vulnerable. It's a version of a service that is vulnerable, right? So we find the versions using SV, followed by a hyphen capital O, which means operating system. It checks for the operating system of the machine that I'm trying to hack. And finally, the IP address of the machine that I want to scan. Sorry, nmap hyphen ss hyphen sv hyphen capital O 192.168.0.106. So let's wait for that to scan. In the meantime, what I'll do is I'll start the Metasploitable framework using the command msf console. Okay, so we have received search results, right? So what do we see here? Port number 21 is running FTP, which is a file transfer protocol service. This is the version of FTP. Port number 22 is running SSH. This is the version of SSH, and so on, right? Service version is done. OS details, the OS scan that we did was running Linux 2.6.x, OS CPE, and OS details right here, right? So generally, we use an OS scan to find a Windows machine because Windows machines are vulnerable at the end of the day. So we try to get into Windows machines via some other ways, like preferably through Windows services itself. But that's a different discussion. It's Linux in this case. Fine. So now the main concern of people that are coming into cybersecurity is how to take the next step. Because obviously I can scan the network, right? But uh, how do we find vulnerabilities? How do we get the vulnerabilities that are available, or how do we exploit vulnerabilities? So let me tell you one thing, it's just a Google search away, right? The moment that we get a scan like this with versions, services, ports, and everything, we start researching, right? 70% of the time that we spend is on researching. So say version 2.3.4 of FTP or VSFTPD. Let's copy that. Go on to our browser, paste that, and search for CVE, right? Common vulnerabilities. So see, we find a CVE, right? A lot of CVEs to be exact, right? So VSFTPD 2.3.4, the one that we searched for, we find it on the exploit database. This is the Google hacking database, right? It contains all of the common vulnerabilities and exploitations for for every single service that you can think about. If there is a vulnerability and it is found, you can find it on this database itself, 100%. Right? So we found a CVE code. This was the author, whatever it might be. And this is the code that we need to run in order to exploit this, right? And it gives you the entire code, right? So all you need to do is, make a little changes. Maybe there are places that you need to put your IP address of the victim machine, of your machine, maybe ports and things like that. So these can be done on your own, right? But if we need to automate this part, this is where Metasploit comes in. So let's go back. We know that VSFTPD is vulnerable. Now, VSFTPD is not the only service that is vulnerable here. The Samba SMBD that is vulnerable. There are other services that are vulnerable as well. The first thing that we find here is the one that we'll be using for this demo. So in MSF console, we'll use the 5 steps of hacking for Metasploit, right? So the first step was search. Okay. Now, one quick question. We have done the recon phase. We have done the scanning phase. What's the next phase?
Gaining access.
Gaining access, right? So, okay, Metasploit is a framework that should be installed on the VM or so. Metasploit comes with Kali Linux itself. Don't need to install it explicitly. Right. So we will gain access now. We will gain access using Metasploit. Hence, we'll be using the 5 steps of Metasploit. First is search. What will we search for? VSFTPD 2.3.4. Right. VSFTPD 2.3.4. And see, we find a vulnerability here. I'll just zoom out a little. It's on different lines. Yeah. Let's clear this. Yeah. So this is a vulnerability. What is the ranking of the vulnerability? Excellent. Right. So what kind of vulnerability is this? It is a backdoor command execution. Backdoor in Linux or a backdoor in the field of cybersecurity is nothing but a port that is explicitly opened by a software that we can access the computer from, right? So we'll be using this backdoor. Let's copy this and we'll be using this. So search is done. Now use. Use this exploit. Exploit is set. Now search use, we see the options. So show options. So in show options, what we see is what are the requirements that we need. C host, do we need it? No. C port, do we need it? No. R hosts or remote hosts as we call it, we need it. Yes. What is the R host? The target hosts, right? So you also have a documentation for it. Target host is nothing but the victim IP address, right? My victim IP address is 192.168.0.106. So let's go. Let's set this. Set our hosts to 192.168.0.106. Right? Our hosts is also set. Search, use, show, set, and then exploit. Now, exploit will do all of the work for us. Found shell. And now command shell session 1 opened. Right? Now, if I go on to my computer and type in an ifconfig, my computer's IP address is 192.168.0.107, right? Great. Now, if I type in inside of this shell, I see ifconfig 192.168.0.106. What does that mean? We are inside of the virtual machine that is running in the background, right? So let's compare it here. If we go on to cd root, right, and do an ls, we see bin, dev, init, rd, lost plus found, no hup, right? So that is what we are supposed to find here as well. Let's go cd/ls. See, bin, boot, dev, etc, init, rd, lost plus found. So ultimately, what is the goal right here is achieved, and we are inside of the system. Now, if it would have been a real system that would have been using Linux and these vulnerabilities, we would have gone into folders, we would have searched for files, we would have copied those files to our system, and finally, everything would have been a good day for us and a bad day for the other person that is using that computer, right? So yeah, that is basically the very basic process of how we hack or gain access to a system. Are there any questions that I can answer, please?
Like here we access a virtual machine and list the folders, is it?
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
Could you please just go through briefly once again the hacking what we did?
Actually, we have some things to cover, but you'll
Okay,
always get the recording, so you can refer it to that after the session itself.
sure, sure.
Right. Okay. Anyone having any more questions? Okay, I take that as no questions. Fine. So, what is the thing that we have here? This virtual machine, right? This is called a metasploitable. So we know that we use the hacked it using Metasploit framework. It is a vulnerable machine that was created to be exploited by Metasploit, right? But it comes bundled with a lot of tools. Like if you type in the IP address on your browser for that virtual machine, 192.168.0.106, you see Metasploitable 2, right? It says never expose this VM to an untrusted network because it is vulnerable. If it hacks into your vulnerable VM, it can always leverage your access through the virtual machine to your actual system as well. So it's preferred not to expose it to a vulnerable system. Right. So it comes with a lot of tools, right? A lot of practice exercises to say. TWiki, PHP-MyAdmin, Mutility, right? One of the most famous ones is DVWA or Damn Vulnerable Web Application, as we call it. Admin, password, right? So, yeah. So, Damn Vulnerable Web Application is nothing but a web application which is deliberately made vulnerable for us to practice what kind of exploits can we do on this system, right? So, let's change it to low for now. Right. Such as SQL injection blind. I will shift, like zoom in a little, just a sec. Just a sec. I need to put my laptop on charge. Yeah, that's perfect. Fine. Right. So what do we see here is a vulnerable web application which uses SQL injection. Right. So what is SQL injection? SQL is nothing but a database, and how every single database or a form that uses SQL works is something called SQL gliding, right? So what happens is you enter your username, it goes to, sorry, just type it, right? So you type in your username, right? Your username goes to the SQL server, and the SQL server returns a 0 or a 1, which means true or false, if the username exists on that particular database. So say it returned a 1. Well and good. Now you enter your password, right? Now two things are taken by SQL, or two things are confirmed by SQL. Number one is if the username and password match, right? So the password, if the password is number one existing on the database, and number two, adhering to the particular username that you are giving, right? Else, what would have happened, except for this logic, if I had a password 1234 and someone else had a password ABCD, and the SQL is just confirming if the password exists or not. Even if that person entered 1234 and hit enter or click on login, it would have logged him in as well, right? So mapping username and password is important in this case. So this entire scenario is taken place. It returns a 1 for existence. It returns a 1 for adherence, right? So if all of these are ones, it is going to give you access to that system, right? Now, what do we do in SQL injection, right? So in SQL injection, we use something called a always true tautology or an always true statement. always true statements are nothing but SQL statements, which will always return 1 as its return value, right? Now, SQL databases are cleaned use in order to mitigate these vulnerabilities, but we are gonna see an example of that. An example of these tautologies is 1 is equal to 1 or 1. So 1 means true. Obviously, we are familiar with that. Is equal to stands for the normal meaning for is equal to. Or is nothing but a AND operation that we have studied in physics in class 12, that we have studied in computer theory as well. So OR is nothing but OR gate. OR gate is nothing but addition. So ultimately what this entire tautology translates to is 1 is equal to 1 plus 1. In binary, by the way, 1 is equal to, it won't be 2. Okay. So 1 is equal to 1 plus 1 in binary. That means it will always return a 1. Always returns 1. Now, if the vulnerability exists for a blind SQL injection and I enter this in the username and password field, it should give me a result out of it, right? So I don't know what it is. Maybe I can type in my name. It is not going to give me a result, right? Submit, no results. I enter this, submit, and I am inside of the system once again. ID 1 is equal to 1 or 1, first name admin, surname admin, ID 1 is equal to 1 or 1. So it's returning 1 for every single ID that is there. And it is ultimately giving me results out of it. Now, SQL injection can be done on a lot of respects, on web applications to be exact, in login forms, in forms that contain a file upload or something like that. Right. Just give me a sec. Let's see if yeah, just a sec. Let me just try it out myself. For yeah. Okay. So the vulnerability that I did right now is something called XSS or cross-site scripting. Right. So this is a reflected cross-site scripting. That is, this is a field, right? This field is supposed to enter data, right? It's supposed to actually take my name and just print hello Arun, right? Now, what happens is if I inject a script right here, a JavaScript to be exact, malicious JavaScript, using the script tag, right? This is something that we use in HTML, in a simple coding and things like that. So if I inject a script right here by force, what is happening is when I submit this, this script is getting executed in the background of the application. Hence, there is a cross-site scripting. If I submit, it's going to show me a pop-up. Right. Now, what is happening is if I change these things, if a website is vulnerable to, what do you call it, cross-site scripting, and I change these messages to say, click here to log in, and I submit, it says click here to log in and an OK button. I can change the respect of this OK button as well, and make it do other stuff. Maybe it can download a malware onto your system. It can guide you to a phishing website. It can log you into other services as well, take your data from you. There are n number of things that I can do with this entire scenario right here. And this is something known as reflected cross-site scripting. Similarly, there are command executions, there's brute force, the CSRF. These are all of the vulnerabilities that we will discuss in detail. Now, coming to the concept of SQL map itself, there are n number of websites that are available which are susceptible to SQL injection. Right. So all of these SQL injections can be exploited by something called SQL map. Right. So let's search for one such website. Just a sec. Okay. So let's just say that there is a if you see something like I'll do in URL ID is equal to 1. If you see a website that contains a ID is equal to 1 in the end of it and a PHP question mark ID is equal to 1, you can be rest assured that it has a vulnerability for SQL, right? Because this is not the ideal thing that we do. Now, we use tools like SQL map in order to exploit these vulnerabilities. Let's clear this. We use SQL map -u followed by the, sorry, just a sec, followed by the URL of the website that we are trying to get into, followed by a --dbs, that means databases. --dbs. Something's wrong. Just a sec. SQL map exists. PHP ID is equal to 1 followed by --dbs. No match is found. Fine, we'll try another website. cycling.org/page.php. It's not connecting to the database. Fine. We'll just see some other options. Right. So what is the main thing that actually SQL map does is changes these IDs to 2, right? For 2, it opened a new page. For 3, it opened a new page, right? So these are all pages that are listed in terms of IDs, right? For 4, it opened a new page. It was as simple as, changing this entire URL to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The manual effort that I'm giving right here is something that SQL map would have done for us or in an automated approach, right? Not sure what happened to the tool, but yeah, that's basically the gist of it about what it actually does. And what happens in these pages is some of these IDs like PHP ID is equal to 8 was probably supposed to be accessed by a privileged user. That is someone that has an account on this particular website, right? But what has happened now is if I directly put it on here, it is going to give me access to that without logging in as well, right? So yeah, are there any questions that I can answer before we start with the conclusion? I don't have the Python package, but still, it's actually installed here. So there's no Python package for it. Same thing. Yeah, just probably need to tweak it. This is the everyday story with Kali Linux. No issues with this. Yeah. So where was I? So yeah, any questions, guys? I think there are no questions. Fine. So yeah, that was the agenda for today. And yeah, so there are n number of tools that are available. There are tools available on GitHub as well. These are some of the tools that we actually have pre-installed on Kali Linux itself, because because now Kali Linux can be or might not be the go-to in industries as well. They might use Parrot Linux or may use some other flavor of Linux, but these tools remain the same because you can install it on any Linux-based environment. So the prerequisites for the course and stuff like that will all be shared. The details will be shared. I hope everyone has joined the WhatsApp group where the details will be communicated. The recordings are also available, so you can refer to those as well. That would be it from my end. Yeah.
Metasploit, do we have any similar framework in Red Hat or SUSE?
You can
Something
install
try.
Metasploit on Red Hat as well.
Okay, that's not inbuilt, right?
No, it's not inbuilt. Okay, Emmanuel, if you can kindly put in the WhatsApp group for them to join. Yeah, great. So the WhatsApp group link is on the chat. You can join that for further details. And yeah, that's the